Hey there everyone and welcome to episode 7 of the Knight Build series. In the previous 6 videos we took a look at all the different skills on the Knight class, how many skill points to put into them, what they actually do for the class, and then a bit of an idea of how you use them. So in this video we're instead going to be bringing all of that information together to talk about how the skills get used in combination to actually achieve damage output, achieve defense, maybe which skill points we're going to actually pick to put onto the class for the different types of content that there is, and examples of builds which you can do at different amounts of skill points, and ultimately what order you choose to do things in, that kind of stuff. So everything to do with skills and everything to do with how to actually play the class and build your character over time is going to be in this video. The next video, episode 8, is also going to be a long presentation style like this, where I go through all the different skill runes and which skill runes to actually take note of, which ones to use, which ones are the best, that kind of stuff. So in this video I'm not going to be mentioning skill runes as very much. There'll be a few mentions of skill runes, particular ones which are key for certain skills in order to achieve certain effects, but not going to be mentioning it that much, with the intention that this video is going to stand the test of time. You can come back to this and refer to it and it's still going to have relevant information because it wasn't too focused in on random stuff which has actually changed over time as more skill runes have been added to the game. So with all that said, let's get stuck into it, but actually I'm going to have to pause just for a moment. Make sure you can read what we have in front of us. I'm going to be going through this as a presentation kind of video, and if you can't read it, then make sure you go onto a device where you can read it, whether that's a laptop. Oh, sorry, I knocked the microphone there. Whether that's a laptop or anything like that, make sure that you can read what we have in front of us here. So the stages, not quite stages, the parts to this video. There are going to be 4 sections that we go through. Sections is the right word. The first section is going to be taking a look at just generally how you want to set up your hotbar. I think this is an important thing that is very easily overlooked, as people just, put the skills on in different places and they don't really think actually what's most effective for putting them in there. It's going to be a short section, just a few minutes at the beginning here, and then we're going to be going through what you want to aim for in terms of skill points. So how many skill points you need for the different skills, and maybe which order we're going to do them in, and what you need for the different bits of content. Then we're going to be going through another long section which is talking about how to use the skills together in order to achieve great damage output. What Knight actually does to do damage and which skills are important, how many skills do you need, and then also similarly for defense, exact same thing. And then lastly, we're going to take quite a long time looking through different builds at different levels of skill points and taking a look at what options you have for the different types of content, and just generally summarizing things. And you can draw from them. They're not necessarily clear cut. You go with that. It's kind of something just to draw from. So the first thing we're going to look at here is this hotbar setup. So here we have an example of a build which I'm going to go through later on in this video, which is a PvE build. So what we're looking here at the bottom, this is one setup, and then this is another build above it, and you can see there's a slight difference here just with Holy Shield being removed for Sever for a bit more damage output. This is a damaging version of it. But anyway, what we're looking at here, what I need you to focus in on, is which skills are on which bar. So this is bar 1 and this is bar 2. Now you can choose to have them the other way around. I personally like to have the buffs and stuff on the first page because I tend to buff up before then going in and attacking, and I put the damage skills and stuff on the second bar. But you can have that the other way around. It's totally up to you. But what's important is that you group them together into certain things. So bar 1, I like to have all the long cooldown skills and buffs and skills which I don't need to see when they're coming off cooldown because they're not needed in a rush. Good example of this, on the other, looking on the flip side, is skills that you need in a rush. In a later build we might need to have Reflect, which I'm pointing at Holy Shield here because Holy Shield is kind of similar with that you would want to use it maybe in response to something, slightly less so than Reflect, though Reflect you might want to just suddenly use at an instant. Say you're going against a boss and a boss is about to one-shot you, and Reflect can make you immune to all damage for 1 second, so maybe you want to have it there just to quickly hit as soon as possible. Well, on bar 1, none of these skills are needed in that way. You don't need to suddenly put it on. Angelic Form maybe sometimes comes under that category, but it's rare and it's a long cooldown skill, so you don't really want it on bar 2. So anyway, that kind of summarizes what bar 1 skills I like to have there. And then the bar 2 is the bar which you're actually going to be sticking on and staying on there the whole time and using those skills. So that's where you want all the short cooldown skills, and you can see I've color coded them here so you can see which ones I mean. Short cooldown skills, we've got Cleave here, just 2-second cooldown, and Hurl, which is 4 seconds cooldown. If you had them on bar 2 and you keep having to flip back to them, that would just be a nightmare. So you want them to be on the same bar. And then also Charge as well, another low cooldown skill. Now we've got just general attacks as well. You want to have those in with the short cooldown skills, so they're ready to attack. The cooldown isn't too long on this either, so just being able to attack with that is great. On the flip side, Whirl here is an attack skill, but it's a bit longer cooldown. It's 10 seconds rather than the 5 seconds, so it's a bit better to have that on the bar 1, so you can flip to it rather than just it being sat there not doing anything. And then lastly, the last section here we have is spam skills. So Holy Shield, which I talked about previously when I talked about the Holy Shield skill in one of the early videos, that I like to spam it as soon as it comes off cooldown. I think it just gives brilliant defense for the class the whole time. So you want to be able to see when that's coming off cooldown and use it as frequently as possible. So spam skills there on bar 2 along with all the attack skills. And then quick reaction skills, like I was saying with the Reflect, perhaps that's how you'd use it, but Knight doesn't really have that so much. That's mainly for the other classes. So that was a PvE build. Then similarly for PvP, you can see it's actually a very similar setup in the skills that we're using. And again, got long cooldown skills and stuff and buffs on the first bar, and then attack skills and low cooldown skills on the second bar. And then moving to farming setup. Farming, you don't need so many skills, so basically you just put them all onto bar 1. And you put the long cooldown skills onto bar 2, so on the flip, flipping them around, because it's pointless to have to flip to bar 2 every time at the beginning of each farming map, so just put them on bar 1 now. And so we've got all the skills on bar 1, and then on bar 2 you can see 2 skills that are long cooldown. That's what I like to use there. So these are me roughly picking. I haven't yet done my Knight farming video. I'm going to be doing farming videos for each of the classes, and Knight is one which I kind of know roughly the skills and how to do the farming. So I had to kind of take a look at it and see which skills are required and good for farming. I think it's these ones, but don't quote me on that. If you go watch my Knight farming video, if that's out yet, you'll be able to see which ones I am definitely saying for sure are the best farming ones. And at the top here we have auto farming setup. I recommend this auto farming setup. Did a bit of testing to see what works best, and that is what I would choose to set up the hotbar for auto farming. So now we're going to go to section 2 of this video, which is talking about each of the skills, the passives, then the actives, and what we need for the different types of content. So first of all, go through passives. This is an extract from my active and advanced skills guide that I link in every single one of these videos in the Knight build series. And basically it goes through, these are the pointless passives that they just don't really have that much. Then we've got some useful ones that are good to have, but you're better off getting points in active skills until much later on. Actually, me personally, I would choose to complete the active skills to the ideal points before considering these. Other than intelligence, the first 10 points in it gets you 100 mana, which is pretty good. And on wizard and archer, the 50,000 health is good, but on knight, that's not so useful. And then lastly, the essential ones. These we do need. And the spirit and mana drain that give you mana back on basic attacks and over time, they're slightly less necessary. You don't need to, when you're very low level, you don't need to have them at 10, you can have them at just 5. The main reason why you need these, even though 1 mana per second sounds like nothing, when you have loads of, 2,000 mana or that kind of thing, it is actually important, because when you've got a mana potion, what it does is it multiplies your natural mana gain. It doesn't give you, say, 100 mana a second automatically. It just multiplies whatever mana you're already gaining by an amount. So you need to have the spirit and mana drain for the sort of passive mana regeneration, which then gets multiplied massively by a mana potion. So they're important even when you have loads of mana. Now moving into the different types of content and how what skills you need for those types of content. I've got 5 different types of content, and as with the other 2 classes, basically we're going to narrow this down to just the top 3. Tough PvE, vary slightly from PvE, but not that much. Basically on Knight, what you do is you use a cooldown potion, and then you can spam the defense skills together to make yourself invincible. So you don't really need to do much different in terms of the skill points. And if you did want to do a different build for tough PvE, what you could do. So like say, for example, you might want to extend the duration of Angelic Form and put 99 points into that when you didn't normally have 99 points in it. Well, you could reset your skills to do that, do the tough content, and then reset your skills back. Similarly with Guild Raid, I have got a Guild Raid video for Night which explains everything to do for that, and you would probably want more skill points in your attack skills. That's typically the way it works. Because you use a cooldown potion, it spams the attack skills frequently, and you can actually increase their cooldowns a bit, and it doesn't slow down the attacks because it's doing so many attacks anyway. It gets stuck in the animations, and you may as well do more damage per hit by putting more skill points into them. But again, you would reset your skill points to do that, and then you'd reset back. So in terms of your actual build that you're going to create, you don't need to take that into account, because you're only going to be putting it to that temporarily. So the first bit of content here that we're going to go through is farming. Now, what do you need for farming that's important in terms of the skill points? We already looked just a few minutes ago at the skills which you need for farming, but in terms of which ones are important to have at certain levels of skill points, you need a low cooldown charge for spamming that to get through the map. Low cooldown hurl, similarly, you just need to have that to hit range of targets as frequently as possible. Well, you can have maybe up to 40 points, because it doesn't increase the cooldown by too much, and you don't need that too frequently. And then you also need a low cooldown Holy Shield. Slightly less requirements than any of the other categories of content. Now, PvP is where it gets incredibly intensive on skill points. So similarly to farming, you need the low cooldown charge, you need the arm up spikes buff. Now this is essential to have. You can see here, I'm talking through the essential things, and there's the useful things. The essential things are to have 99 points in rage and spikes. Spikes gives you the huge armor buff, in rage gives you the huge damage buff. That's just how they work generally. And then also you need Holy Shield with the low cooldown. Now, useful things to have are more damage on the maim, because just getting those hits in, you get them in to try and, well, to best explain, in PvP, if you can do a lot of damage in an instant, it's a lot more beneficial than if you can do it over time, because people can react over time, they can put on defense buffs and that kind of stuff. Whereas if you find an opening, you want to exploit that opening by killing them quickly. So having maim more powerful is very good for that. Cleave, it's so low cooldown that because you'll be using loads of skills, you may as well have more damage each time you use it. And then there are a few skills which benefit from being at 99, as well as having Sunder and Reflect. They can sometimes come into play to be useful. The skills you don't need, there are a few of them there. Sever, this is, I've listed it as not needed for both PvP and PvE. This is because I really don't think it's going to be that great, because the cooldown's long, and it's kind of like a cleave, but a less good cleave. Now, if great skill runes come for it, it would be a useful thing to add as well. PvE, kind of similar to PvP, but we don't need I'm trying to think now, we don't need some of the higher damage on maim. So maim only up to 64 as opposed to up to 99 it benefits here. So what this is doing is it's having a look and saying, okay, we want it up to 99 for PvP, but actually for PvE we don't want it 99, we want it 64 at most. And then similarly for the other things, that's kind of how we're looking at this. So we need some low cooldowns for some of the things, larger buff. Nothing really too different from PvP in terms of like you've got to have lower skill points on something or higher skill points on something. The main thing here is maim, you don't want quite so high, and cleave as well. While you could put it to like 64, 57. I mean, there's not a huge amount of difference there, but basically you don't want to push cleave too high for PvE because you do need the low cooldown for the times when you're not using cooldown potion, or you just want to get lots of damage output there. In PvP you tend to have a bit more, you use it less frequently because you're more focusing on defense stuff. In PvE as well, an additional thing which you don't need is lay on hands. Because we have healing potions and just generally you can tank up so much, and if some content's really hard you can use a cooldown potion, cooldown potion, so you don't need to have a skill which essentially just full heals you. Yeah, it gives you the shield protecting, that's what's great in PvP, but in PvE slightly less useful. You're better off having a different skill on your hotbar. So bringing that information above together to actually work out how many skill points we need to put into the different things. For the passives, there are 60 essential passives to have here. Like I said, Spirit and Mana Drain can be 5 each. You want to do that when you're low level, but effectively you do want to get them up to 10 before once you have more skill points. And I haven't included intelligence at all here, but you do want that kind of 99 if possible later on, further down the road when you need more mana. So going for the essential skill points here, well, let's take a look at the passives here in game. It's much easier to read here. So this is the 60 points in passives, actually 50 because, like I said, you've got the 5 points in each of these. I'd say this is essential, but it's more essential early game, low level, and later on you do need both of those mana skills at 10. But this is how it looks in game. And then next screen we've got, I've got it in slightly wrong order, I think. Sorry. Okay, there we go. And so this is the active skills that you want early on. So we got 10 in most of the skills. I think the only skill that we're missing 10 in is dual wield here, which is 1. And then that's just to be able to, in order to activate dual wield. And then we've got 99 points in enrage here and in spikes. So all the skills come into play somewhere. You want 10 skill points in each of them. You can, when you're very low level, cut back on some of them a bit. So you can maybe cut back on Rumble, you can cut back on Frenzy. We'll be talking about that later. But they all are useful in certain places, and it's very good to have 99 points in Enrage and Spikes. If you want to be competitive at all, you need to have those 99 points in there. So that's going through this bit here, the essential things. Now in total that is 369 skill points. It's quite a lot. The original skill points that you needed to hit for maxing everything in the game was 300. And I'm saying as like essential stuff on Knight is to have 369 skill points. It's a lot to get, and Knight is the most skill point heavy class. But what this means is kind of good in a way that as you keep leveling up, you're going to keep gaining actual effective boosts. Whereas the other classes, past a certain point, they don't really get much benefit from extra skill points. They get small benefits, but Knight actually gets some proper benefit from it. Just means you're a bit slow to begin with because you're missing some key components, like Spikes and Enrage, which benefit massively from going to 99, that obviously take a long time to get to 99 originally. Now that's just the essential stuff. Now we're going to go through the useful stuff. So the useful stuff is getting dual wield from 1 to 10. 1 is just the bare minimum. It's the main thing that you need, really, just the ability to put on a second sword, and then putting it up to 10 just gives you a damage boost when you are dual wielding. Next is the Protector to 99. Now this is in no particular order. We're about to go through the order below. Protector to 99. This just gives it more damage reduction. Great stuff there. Angelic Form, longer duration, great for both PvE and PvP. You can see in brackets here, so I'm listing where this gives you a benefit. And then Frenzy, this is mainly if you're using it with the Silent skill rune for tackling wizards. It's a very effective skill for tackling wizards, and that's, I would say, probably the only use. I mean, skill runes in the future may give it other uses, but for now, at the time I'm making this video, Frenzy even PvP for dealing with wizards, that's what it is, and you get a lower cooldown when you put more points in it. Sunder, having this for PvE and PvP, it's sometimes a useful skill. With skill runes further down the road, it might be very powerful, so this is a skill to get, and similarly Reflect for PvP. Now we talk about getting 2 skills up, which are Cleave and Maim. So these are basically quite low cooldown skills, and so while they are great to have at 10, and I'd say probably if you had really high elemental stats, you might consider keeping them at 10. But there's a strong argument to make to put them higher, which I went through in the first video in this series. So go watch that video if you really want to hear more about that. But basically, ultimately, I think you do want them both at these levels. And then if you're low elemental stats, you can put Maim even higher, up to 99. You'll get benefit there just for having that massive hit. Before then, later on, maybe when you get your elemental stats higher, you want to reduce it because it's not giving you that much more damage, and actually you'd prefer the lower cooldown. So, including all these useful skills, then it becomes 944 skill points in total, which is enormous, absolutely enormous. As my wizard, which I've been playing for years, I think I'm level 800 or 850 or something, so I don't even have 944 skill points. But like I said, you can see this in a positive light, in that as you carry on leveling up, you're still gaining benefit from these things, and you can choose to, like, say, miss the advanced skills, just, not having them. It's kind of fine, and that's like, a couple of hundred skill points there, so you don't need to get to 944 before you're good. You just need this essential stuff, then you're in a good place, and then this extra stuff is just a benefit for you. So I think I've got a couple of screenshots here showing the endgame passives. The only difference here between early game and end game is you get the 10 points in intelligence and increase both the mana ones to 10 from 5. And then looking at the skill points, this is sort of what I would class as the ultimate setup. It doesn't include Sever here. Like I said, I'm not sure about Sever at the moment. If Sever becomes good with skill runes, then for sure add that into it as well. But I've just decided not to include it. It was actually a last minute thing when I was looking at this. I was thinking, should I include it or not? Should I add it in? And I decided, no, I'm going to go with what I originally wrote down in this for this video, that I'm not including it. But anyway, 99 skill points in lots of things, as you can see. We've got the 57 and 64 in Maim and Cleave for the 8-second cooldown on Maim and the 3-second cooldown on Cleave. And then everything else is either 10 or 99. So now we're going to be going through the order. This is the order I would personally recommend for these useful things. So once you have this build above, the essential build, and you've got the things that you really, really need for Knight, then I would say there's a particular order which I would choose for adding the extra stuff onto your class. So the first thing I would do is I would put Maim up to 64. I think having that really big hitter for PvP is very useful. It's unfortunately in PvP there's a slight kind of strategy thing which is annoying, of killing off the AFK people. I mean, because we get benefit just from basically going into PvP, a lot of people will go into PvP and not actually play. So they'll be sat there, and then you run around, and if you're actually playing, you run around and you have some free kills off them. So Maim is very useful for just killing them off very quickly by doing one big hit there. But otherwise, for killing people off, it's very useful having more damage in that. So I'd say that's probably the first thing you do after the Enrage and Spikes, of course. And then if you don't have high elements, maybe consider taking it all the way to 99. It's a choice to have there. Next is Cleave. Again, more damage output. I think Knight generally does very, very well on defense. So one of the good things to get early on as possible is more damage output. So Cleave, putting more points into that to really get some more damage output from that is good to do. Dual Wield up to 10. I say at this point just because you may as well. It's 9 skill points, very cheap to do. Just put those points into there, and it means if you're dual wielding, then you get a bit more damage. You could do this earlier as well, rather than putting points into Maim or Cleave. This is, it's not a strict order. And then Frenzy, this is if you're into PvP. If you're not into PvP, you can choose to do this later. But this is more specifically for taking down wizards in PvP by having the Silent Screwing in it. And getting it from 10 to 99 reduces the cooldown, makes it a bit more effective at doing that. But it's a small bonus, and only if you're really focused on doing PvP well. Then there's the Angelic Form, getting that to 99 for the longer duration, Protector for the higher buff, and then lastly the advanced skills. So that's the order I would choose to put skill points into the different skills as I level up if I was playing Knight. So now we move to Section 3. Section 3 is where we're going to go through the damage output and defense on a Knight. So if I can... I'm not sure if we can actually fit this all on screen. Maybe we can. I'm struggling to get the corner there. I'll just move it up and drag this corner down. There we go, that's more effective. I'm not sure if we can. Maybe if I click here, I think I can do this to get it. Yeah, we can get it like that. We don't need the title. Okay, so what we're looking at here is all the damage skills, or just generally, I think it's pretty much all the skills on the Knight class. And I've categorized them into primary damage skills, secondary damage skills, and minor damage skills. Now, if you watched my Wizard video, this is quite similar to what I did there. The difference is, though, on Wizard, while the numbers are really structured, so the primary damage skills do double what the secondary damage skills do, and then the minor damage skills do like a big drop down, Knight isn't quite so structured. So this is kind of more my own, not representation, can't think of the word right now, but this is more my own idea of which are the best damage dealers, the ones that then support damage with secondary damage skills. So if you're using them, then your damage output will definitely be better. And then the minor damage skills you wouldn't really use for damage. They're just kind of useful in either in certain builds, or like if you're using them anyway for other reasons, then you gain some benefit. For example, Protector, you use this for defending yourself or defending your party, and with the runes in it, you do a bit of extra damage on basic attacks. So you wouldn't use it for the damage, but it does add a little bit more damage when you use it. Now in Rage here, I would like to make a special note, because Enrage is obviously a buff to your damage. It's incredibly powerful with that, and with that in mind, it's kind of a primary damage skill. It's very important for your damage output, but in terms of what the skill actually does itself from runes, I wanted to highlight that the runes on it don't do much damage at all. It's very much minor in that regard. It's just the buff element which you want to use it for. So the starred ones, well, I'll talk through these first. So this, you can see spikes in PvE, spikes in PvP. I've split it, and this is versus knights. So knights, when they hit you and you've got spikes on, they take the damage, whereas wizards and archers in PvP, they won't take the damage, and it's very effective in PvP as a damage dealer. But in PvE, enemies don't hit you that much. They'll do a hit every other second or something like that, so they don't actually take too much damage from it. So split there, and then Reflect in PvP. It's not really a damage dealer, well, for the same reason that Spikes is. In PvE, enemies don't hit you fast enough, so in that 1 second window when you're going to deal damage to anyone who hits you, it's not really going to damage them that much. But in PvP, if you use it when you're getting hit lots by another person, it can actually do some pretty good damage. So that's those bits. And then starring them, these stars are part of, well, there's 3 there. There's one on Charge, there's one on Sever, and then there's one on Enrage. Now these skills are part of the strategy which is what I would say the best strategy for dealing damage output with Knight, which is using Charge with the Sparkling Gift skill rune. You can also use the skill rune, I think it's, I can't remember exactly, but there's a couple of skill runes on Spikes which have the effect that when you get hit they pull enemies into you. And anyway, that's what you use Sparkling Gift for. When you use it, it pulls all the enemies in from a wide area and they get right next to you. Now this seems like a bad idea, except that Knights have enough defense that you can tank all that, and by putting them all in, it means that you can hit them with moves like Cleave, Hurl, Whirl, Sever, and then Enrage being part of that, because if you're Enraged when you pull them all in and then you spam all those damage skills, that's when you're going to clear out the enemies super fast. So those skills are what I would say part of the core damage output and damage package, I guess you could call it, on Knight, and you want to make sure you have that. You don't necessarily need Sever, but you do need the other ones for dealing great damage output in every bit of content. Not just PvE, it's actually PvP as well. So that's what I detail here at the bottom. To have good damage output on Knight, you need to have all the primary damage skills, and you need to use Charge to pull the enemies into close range, then use Enrage, and you do huge damage per second. Now, that's these primary damage skills, well, ignoring Spikes there because PvE. Maim does not kind of technically come under that, pulling them in, but it is a very good damage dealer, and in most bits of content there'll be a boss and small enemies, and so by pulling in everything and then doing that area of effect damage, it's going to take out all the small enemies, and you basically just focus on the boss. So you attack the boss with those skills, but it's hitting all the other enemies around, and you're also doing Maim on the boss. That's how you get great damage output, and that's what you do. Now, in terms of builds for elemental stuff, a little bit of mention of skill rune here. So I mentioned Hurl, and a lot of people might be surprised that I mentioned that as a primary damage skill, as well as Rumble as a minor damage skill. Rumble is not kind of a damage skill as such. It's got one skill rune in it, which is Volcano Eruption, which turns it into a damage skill, but it's not a great damage skill, and mainly because it only hits in a small area. But and Hurl is, I would say, probably more of a secondary damage skill, but with the Dancing Toxic skill rune, it makes it do huge elemental damage because there's a huge damage over time on it as well. So it turns into a damage skill, a primary damage skill. But if you have low nature, then it's not going to be as strong as the other skills there. I would still use it. Where I wouldn't use it is if I had low nature and high fire, in which case it's probably better to consider Volcano Eruption over Dancing Toxic. because in those cases, I think it would probably be significant enough that Volcano Eruption would be better, would do more damage. So that's the only other kind of consideration to take into account. Otherwise, I would say definitely primary damage skills, pull them in, and use Enrage. Now, if you want a more offensive setup, using less defense, we'll be talking about builds later on, and you'll see that again. But I would say the thing to include would be Sever or Sunder, or both Rumble and Hurl. Basically, those are the things to consider bringing into it, on top of the core stuff there, which I say. Now in PvP, it doesn't differ that much. You're still using the primary damage skills and with charge, but here it's not going to pull enemies in. It's just going to get you into the into combat, because in PvE all the enemies run at you, but in PvP they kind of run away from you if you're a knight. So you're charging to get to them, and the Sparkling Gift skill rune on charge will stun the enemy. So ideally you're going to charge at them, stun them, and then you can start doing all the skills at close range. Now, you may also consider using Whirl rather than when you're in the combat. Use it before, because it gives you stun immunity. And then using Enrage for the damage per second as well, like normal. Now, again, we got the switching Dancing Toxic out if your elemental stats are low. Your nature stat is low. Here, rather than using Rumble, I would recommend using Reflect, Sever, or Sunder. The reason is, the one skill rune we have for Rumble, which makes it a good damage output skill rune, it's only good because it puts a little fiery area on the ground. Now, that area which it puts fire is very, very small, so in PvP, you're not going to hit people with it. Either they're going to have moved very slightly, or if they're trying to run away, then they're never going to stand in it at all. So you want to use one of the other skills for damage, and I would say Reflect, Sever, or Sunder are good for that. I say Sever with a I didn't mention it earlier on because I'm not totally certain, but anyway, Reflect, Sunder for sure. They can be moved in, and then if you want to go with a more defensive setup, because you'll see in a second when I go to defense that I'm not going to mention Protector for PvP. If you want to include Protector, then I would recommend probably Hurl being the thing to remove. Unless you are like a huge nature build, in which case Dancing Toxic will be a brilliant damage dealer and you'll remove something else, but probably Hurl will be the one to remove. So I hope that gives you an idea of how to do damage on Knight, and how it's basically these skills plus charge for pulling in the enemies, and then Enrage. That's it in a nutshell. Moving on to defense skills for Knight. So let's see if we can, we'll just move slightly, so we have it like this. We'll have to move down a little bit later on, but anyway, so there are I put them into two different categories here, the buff skills and the control skills. Now, compared to the other classes, Knights have much less control. It's not that much, and you can see also I've got in brackets remove on some of them. I'm going to be removing a few of these in a second. But Knights have a lot more buffs, which makes sense, because Knights are meant to be tanky, and they're not going to be, well, they are naturally tanky a little bit, but they're not going to be it all from their natural stats. They're going to have it from skills. So let's go through the control skills just for a second. We've got Rumble, which is a big area stun. Useful, but it's not really good enough to be used as the skill itself. Frenzy, the control element of this right now is in a skill rune, which means that your basic attacks do fear, so enemies run away, which is not really what you want, because with Knight, when you do basic attacks, you have to be close range. So as you hit this enemy, it starts running away from you, and then you basically spend your time running after it. But anyway, so in PvP, it's useful for silencing, so that is a control element, disabling the other person. Lay on Hands, it has a big area stun. However, because it's such high cooldown, you can't really use this for that. It's kind of a nice bonus if you're using one of those skill runes in it. But effectively, that's not really a control bit on the class. Just something to note. And then we've got Hurl. There are runes on there which slow the enemies, but again, not very effective. None of Knight's control is actually that effective. But then we move to the buffs, and the buffs sure are effective. So Royal Blade. If you've watched the previous video, you'll know I hate Royal Blade. It's not been designed that well. Maybe with skill runes later on, it'll have some good buffs to it, or control elements, or whatever. But right now, it's not. Similarly with Frenzy, I was just talking about that, and the buff I'm trying to think defense buff. What is it? Oh, it's in the skill rune. There's some interesting things in the skill runes. So far, the skill runes for defense, skill runes for defense. They do a little bit of healing and stuff, but it's nowhere near in comparison to what you get from other skills. So that can be removed. And then buffing on Enrage. This is the Demon's Rage skill rune so far, and it gives an armor buff. I think it goes up to 100%, and that's not actually that much because it's on top of your natural 105% boost. And then if you're using the spikes, which every knight should be using night spikes, they are already on 505% with boost. So going from 505% to 605% is not that much. So it's not really a sort of important buff skill. So taking a look at the things which really do matter, because none of these control skills matter, and I've narrowed this down quite a bit. We've got the spikes buff, which if you watch the spikes video, you'll know this gives you a huge armor buff, and in fact we were literally just talking about it. This is a constant buff to your character. It's just essential and super strong. Protector gives you the buff for 10 seconds, pretty useful, mainly in PvE. A Holy Shield giving you a buff. Now, this is mainly in the skill rune, which I went into when talking about the skill in the previous video, and it gives you 40% damage reduction for 5 seconds after the shield bursts. So this is incredibly strong and very underrated. But anyway, that's a very strong defense buff. Lay on Hands, healing is not itself a defense buff, but in the skill runes, actually I should have written in brackets runes, but anyway, in one of the skill runes, Protective Waves, it gives you a health shield of 100% for the next 5 seconds after you use it. It's a huge buff to the character. The only problem is the long cooldown, and I went into earlier with PvE stuff. Angelic Form, incredible defense. I think that goes without question. And then Reflect, it's only 1 second's defense, but if you're spamming it frequently in PvP, or you otherwise use it to like avoid a one-shot attack in PvE, it can come into play. It's quite an interesting one. So I have starred a few of them, which are what I would class as the most important ones. So Spikes here, which is a huge armor buff. I think that goes without saying. It's just vital on every build you do. Angelic Form, huge defense buff again. It's got a long cooldown, but it's so powerful and goes for quite a few seconds that it's so good. It's really hard to see why you'd use another skill over that. And then we've got Holy Shield, which I was going into a second ago with the 40% damage reduction for 5 seconds. Very strong with a low cooldown. You can spam that like crazy. So those three, I would say, are the strongest defense buffs on Knight class, and what I would use in every build. So splitting up between PvE and PvP, how many skills do you actually need? Well, you only need 4, which is kind of surprising. I thought that you probably need more, but when I'm doing this video and looking at it and seeing how to make builds and stuff, I realised you only need 4 skills for defense when you play Knight. So that you've got the 3 essential skills on both PvE and PvP. The difference between PvE and PvP is Protector. So Protector gets halved in value in PvP. It only gives 30% rather than 60%. So PvE, it's brilliant, and in party play, it's absolutely brilliant. But when it comes to PvP, I would say Lay on Hands is stronger, because that instant full heal, and if you're using it with the skill rune to give you a shield for 5 seconds, it's so strong for keeping you alive in combat that its long cooldown just doesn't really matter that much. And Protector I put with a question mark, because you can, if you want to go more defensive, bring it in. You would have seen in the section above where I was talking about damage, and if you wanted to go with a more defensive setup for PvP, you could remove, say, Hurl, put in Protector. But I think you probably have enough without it that you don't actually need it, especially if you've got set effects going on for defense. So what I think is really important to go through in order to really help everyone get their head around the defense on a Knight is talking about the different combinations, and I think a lot of people don't really know what these are as well and how strong they are. So one of the biggest combos is Protector plus Holy Shield, and that is because with the skill rune and Holy Shield getting the 40%, Protector giving you the 60%, when both are active at the same time, you are literally invincible. And with the cooldowns on them, and especially when you use a cooldown potion, you can spam these like crazy, and there's only a few windows where you aren't invincible. So that's where Knights can go really crazy with their defense, and they can kind of do it anyway. It's probably the main reason why they nerf Protector in PvP, because 60% damage reduction that you can get from Protector just makes you only really need one other defense buff and then you're practically invincible. So they nerfed it to stop you from just being able to become invincible quite so easily. And in PvP, so there you go, it's 70% in PvP if you use both those skills. Now spikes you're going to have on constantly, because like I said, it's got the, I think, 40-second cooldown, 30-second duration. And because of cooldown reduction, it's actually like 32 seconds cooldown with 30-second duration, so it's practically constant. In PvP, it's nerfed from the 300% boost to 200% boost, which means that rather than 60% damage reduction, it is effectively 50%. So anyway, going through some of the numbers here, if you use it with Holy Shield, you get the 40% damage reduction and then effectively damage halved by your double armor from spikes. 2.5 times. So anyway, it's 76%, the equivalent of 76% damage reduction, and in PvP it's 70%. So you can see here a reason why not to use Protector. Well, you already have 70% damage reduction with spikes and Holy Shield, and because of Holy Shield having quite a low cooldown, you can be at like this a lot of the time. And in comparison, spikes with Protector gives you more in PvE, but when you go to PvP, and it gives you less. I would say 65% is strong, but it's not quite strong enough to actually make you feel like you can tank a lot. So Protector, I'm a little down on it in PvP. I don't think it's that good. And I think a lot of people, because they love it for PvE so much, they want to use it in PvP, and I'd say it's one of the skills you can cut. Now if you have all three active, obviously we know from PvE that it's 100%. In PvP, if you have all three active at once, you get 85% damage reduction, which is great, and it's practically invincible. Angelic Form gives you 75%, and if you can alternate between this and Angelic Form, which you can't because of the cooldowns, you would be practically invincible the whole time. So that's going through a bit of the combos. Hopefully that clears it up for anyone who isn't really sure about how much damage reduction you're getting at different points, and the difference between the PvE here and the PvP sides of things, because things are nerfed in PvP. This next bit you might be looking at, and I did this for Wizard too, and it's kind of giving you a rough idea of how you can use the skills over time in order to keep your defense up. Because most people will know, and it'll be second nature to you after you've played for a long time, how to stagger your defense skills to keep the buffs up at various points. Autoplay does this terribly, and it's why I do not like using autoplay, because it's fine if you're overpowered for something, but if you actually need to keep your defenses up, autoplay just spams all your defense skills at once and then leaves you with a massive opening. So this is an idea over 1 minute how you can stagger your defense skills to keep everything going. So spikes can be practically constant. There's just one little gap here for 2 seconds, which I would say isn't too much of a worry for knights because you have the naturally higher health and defense. But it is something to keep in mind when you can see spikes is coming off cooldown. You know there's going to be a little window where you're going to take more damage, and bear that in mind, especially in PvP. If you're about to be disabled or that kind of thing, maybe just run around the corner just for a couple of seconds so you can reapply the spikes buff. And then effectively what we're doing here, if you can notice, is we're alternating between Holy Shield and Protect, and Holy Shield and an Angelic Form, then Holy Shield and Protect, and there's only a gap every other one where Angelic Form is not off cooldown. I've put Lay on Hands, that's what it's called, here at the bottom, but I haven't actually added it in. This is where you could use Lay on Hands to cover this gap here, in order to keep 2 defense buffs on at any one time, spikes and something else. But I would say it's probably not that necessary. So Holy Shield, it really effectively covers you for this time, giving you the 40% damage reduction. We can see here, spikes plus Holy Shield. In PvE, you're getting the 76%, effectively 76% damage reduction while this is up. And then after then, we go to spikes and Protector, get the 84% or 65% PvP if you are using it there. And then we go back to 76%. So at any one time, you can have 75% or higher damage reduction in PvE, or in PvP you could have 65% or higher. And this is without a cooldown potion, I might add. If you have a cooldown potion, then you have to just 100% most of the time. But without a cooldown potion, you can actually stagger them to have this huge damage reduction for almost all the time. So this is why you only really need these 4 skills. if you have these 4 skills, you can cover yourself very consistently, and you shouldn't have too many openings where you can actually be, killed that easily. Sure, you're not actually healing, you've just got good damage reduction, but if you've got, say, lifesteal on your character, then you're going to be regaining health off that. Perhaps you've got, a teammate healing you, but I mean, to be fair, potions and lifesteal, I would say, are the main things here. Or there's certain skill runes as well, which can be adding health to you. So, for example, the protector skill runes, the best ones of those right now have a buff to your character where on basic attacks you may do a bit of damage and heal yourself. You've also got set effects as well. Yeah, that's the main thing that I couldn't think of. You've got set effects which you can use to heal you up. One of the best set effects for Knight is the one which heals you very consistently by 15%, and it's every 10 seconds or so when you get hit. That helps your health be topped up at all times, along with lifesteal and stuff. You're going to be staying alive very nicely. So this is how defense works on a Knight, and like I said, it's these 4 skills. Mainly the 3 skills. You don't need to include Protector in PvP because it's nerfed there. You have the Lay on Hands instead for the times when your health is actually dropping. Then you can heal yourself up like that and have a shield for the next few seconds. And yeah, that's it for defense. So now we move into the last section of this video. We're going to be talking about example builds. So I've got the first one here. Oh no, it's not the first one. Where is the first one? Oh, it's gone out of order. Sorry for this. So this is the first one here we're going to go through. I'm going to go through them at 120 skill points, 160 skill points, and then 300 plus. So if we just move this, we should be able to go through it. I think I messed up like this before in the first video. Alright, I can't drag it now. Do it from the corner. There we go. Alright, let's just do it like that. Right, so this is the first build that we've got here, and this is a PvE build. So I try my best to make this effective and work for the number of skill points. I would say this is better than the build we're about to look at for PvP, which is more optimized for PvP. But this is your sort of general use build that's going to work quite nicely. We've got 50 points in the passives. I don't show the passives above, but this is the 50 essential passives that we talked about before, and it's 5 in each of the mana passives. I had to cut back some points there so we could have more active skills. 5 in Maim. It benefits slightly less from going to 10 points than other skills. Cleave benefits loads, so you definitely want Cleave at 10. But Maim at 5 is fine with the cooldown and the damage. Later on, obviously, you do want to get it up, but it benefits slightly less. Charge at 5 as well. You don't need the damage on that, and the cooldown is kind of okay at that point. You mainly want to put points in it for the lower cooldown. And then the other skills that we've got are at 10. So main thing we're missing here is Enrage. Enrage is very useful for the auto crit, and if you've got the skill runes for the damage buff, namely Demon's Rage gives you a damage buff if you get hit when you've got the Enrage active. But anyway, the auto crit's also just very useful in general. But I think at this point you need the defense buffs more, and then just have some skills for damage rather than optimizing for huge damage output. So it's got everything that's essential, all the important stuff, and you need the skill rune for Holy Shield, which is very easily accessible, either Shield of Light or Shield of Frost, and then that gives you the defense buff on Holy Shield after you use it. At the bottom you can see how I would choose to set up the skills. It's basically exactly how I would later on, but with a couple of skills missing. So now we go to the PvP setup. Now this is pretty much the same. The main difference here is I removed both the mana passives to get 10 extra points. Reason is, in PvP you don't actually need those mana passives because we don't have a mana potion. I mean, that's kind of the main reason why they're in there, is for the mana potion, so you can recover mana that way. PvP you don't have that, plus your mana resets when you die, and it's likely, if you're at this level and stuff, you're going to get killed quite frequently, so you won't need to have your mana very high or anything like that. So you can get some extra points there, and then those points are being used in Maim and getting Enrage. Also Whirl. I think we didn't have Whirl previously. So getting Enrage to 10 means you can do a lot more damage output. Getting that auto crit, very useful. If you've got the Skurun for doing getting a damage buff too, then that's brilliant. And having the extra damage skill Whirl there, which also gets you the stun immunity for PvP, which can be very useful. Yeah, we've got some better stuff going on there. Now, some things are not quite at 10, both Hurl and Whirl, because you just don't have enough skill points. I mean, this is 120 skill points, so try to make something here, but you can't have everything. And then a few points taken out from Charge as well. Well, I think it's just 1 point, because just trying to get the skill points and other skills. And you need Charge from time to time for PvP, but you don't need it super frequently. So this this build works pretty well. Oh, it also doesn't have the Protector skill, that's right. It's Switch Protector for layered hands, like I was saying. Now this build would not work so well for PvE. I would not recommend this so much for actually creating this and using it generally, because you need Protector. But if you want to go fully optimize at PvP at this stage in the game, then this is probably the way I would choose to do it. The next build to talk about is going up to 160 skill points, if we can find it. There we go. And this one, we have a few more skill points to go around, and I would say you don't need to have different setups for different things, because you've actually got enough skill points at this point to have the different things you need. The only thing that you really don't have, which you would very much benefit from, is spikes, but that's from getting spikes to 99, and so you clearly don't have enough skill points for that. So at this point, putting 60 points into the mana passives, into the passives, we've got both the mana passives at 10. You just got enough skill points to do that at this point. And then 10 in all the different skills which we've got here. You can see we've got 10 skills on the class now, and you're just generally set up for everything that you want to do. So that means you can switch between Protector and Lay on Hands or whatever for PvP. Actually, looking at this. No, you can have Lay on Hands constantly because we don't have the Spikes skill at this point. You can replace Lay on Hands later on with Spikes when you've got that leveled up a fair amount. So this is what I recommend as just the best build to have when you hit 160 skill points. Now past 160 skill points, it's less interesting because basically you have, like I say, enough skill points to get everything you need. And so it's more a case of then you start getting the, first of all, the essential stuff that you need, which is Spikes and Enrage up to 99. And then the stuff which I detailed earlier on in the video, going all the way up to 944 skill points. So, in fact, what I would recommend, rather than showing different builds at different points of skill points, I would say work towards this essential point, doing Spikes to 99 first before you touch Enrage, and then doing a Rage from 10 to 99. And then from there, going through in the order which I explained. That's basically what I'd say, and so I'm not going to bother showing at different points, because it'd just be different points in the development of this. But what I can do is show you how you'd set up your hotbar, which skills you'd use. So this is a PvE build here, a PvE setup, I should say. And so we've got the couple of notes which we had at the previous point in the earlier point in the video, showing how to set up the hotbar with the long cooldown skills here, the shorter cooldown skills here, and then this is explaining here about how you would use the setup. Sorry. So you pull the enemies together, which is the charge skill in the middle. I say then enrage and then spam them. You can enrage beforehand, probably best to enrage beforehand. So you have this, you do your buff stuff, you charge in, pull the enemies together, and then you start spamming these skills. You want to keep spamming Holy Shield, like I've said multiple times in talking about Holy Shield. It's great to just keep spamming off, having that shield there, having the defense buff that comes after it. It's a low cooldown, so you want to do that. And then flipping out to do Whirl whenever you have any kind of room or you know it's come off cooldown. And like I said previously, you can swap Hurl for Rumble if your nature's very low and you've got high fire. You probably get better damage output from that. So this is a great PvE build that just is going to work and going to do everything you want. Up at the top, we've got pretty much the same, but swapping Holy Shield for Sever. So same strategy in how you actually use it, but the thing is here, if you've got really high stats for the content, you don't need all the defense, Protector and Spikes and Angelic Form if you need it. Like that's all enough, and so you don't need Holy Shield on top of that. So you can swap Holy Shield out for another damage skill. And in this case, I've gone with Sever because just having extra AoE damage means you can clear out the enemies really nicely. But if you want more single target damage, you can use Sunder instead of Sever there. Now looking at PvP builds, we've got a couple here to go through, and then listing at the top here, this is talking about using 11th skills if you want to use any extra skills which you can't fit into the 10 skills. So we'll look at the bottom here first. This is exactly the same as what we had before, but in place of Protector we've got Lay on Hands instead. Like I've said at a couple of points in this video, that's just what I recommend for PvP. And so the same setup on the hotbar, we just use the same, exactly the same thing. It's nice having the same setup for both things so you learn where the skills are, and switching between the two bars can be a little tricky for some people, so having the things in the same position is great for that. And then above we have a higher defense setup, so this is including Protector. So you can see here at the bottom we've got Protector in there, and we'll notice that I've put Lay on Hands where Whirl was, and then removed Hurl, and we've got Whirl on there. Now for PvP, I would say because of the stun immunity which Whirl gives you, it's kind of better to have there than Hurl. I do love the skill Hurl, but I would say it's more useful having that stun immunity which you can put on. And it's also nice to sort of set up before you go into combat, and it will, just be there doing damage while you're using the other skills. So anyway, this is a more defensive setup for PvP. Your damage output will definitely be lower, but you've included Protector, so you can survive better. And then here at the top, we're talking about swapping out 11th skills. So in the middle here, where you have Lay on Hands, I say to include Lay on Hands. However, the cooldown on it is very long, and after you use it, it may not be, it won't be available for a long time. So you might want to swap it out for different things. You can also similarly swap out Charge, and I've purposefully put both Charge and Lay on Hands in the middle here because then you always know, okay, it's the middle point which I swap out, and that just helps with the muscle memory of doing the swapping out skills. So you can swap out Charge when you're in combat and it's just staying there. You can see, sorry, me talking about the note here. When in extended combat, you can replace Charge with, say, Reflect or Sever. Reflect is especially useful when you're in combat already because you're going to get hit by the enemy, so you can be reflecting the damage effectively like that. And so anyway, you swap it out and switch to a different skill. Lay on Hands, let's just go through the notes here. Lay on Hand or Charge can be swapped out for 11th skill. Switching Lay on Hands for Frenzy or Sunder, Charge for Reflect or Sever. So like I said, Charge when you're in combat, Lay on Hands when it's on cooldown, pretty much. The main thing here for Frenzy, we have it in a note up here. When facing tough wizards, Frenzy is a good choice for the silent skill. You can really lock them down, and so beforehand, okay, there's a wizard up there, I'm going to go face a wizard, so I'm going to swap out my Lay on Hands for Frenzy beforehand, so then I can put it on to go engage with the wizard. Maybe you'll do that just for the whole fight, just have Frenzy in there, not use Lay on Hands. Or maybe you're, when you need to heal later on, you're taking a bit of damage, maybe you're stunned at the time, so you can't even use skills, so then you swap out Frenzy for Lay on Hands while you're in combat doing that, and then use it, and then maybe swap it back to Frenzy, that kind of thing. That's what I would personally do if I was playing Knight. I do like to use skill swapping, and if you've seen any of my wizard content, you might know that when I'm facing someone tough, I'll switch a skill out to refract in combat, use refract, and then switch it back. I like to do stuff like that, and when we had 5 skills, I used to be really good at it. I look at my content back then and I think, wow, no, I can't do skill swapping like that anymore. It's not a thing in the game since we've got 10 skills. But anyway, that's it for this final build. I think that pretty much sums up this video. We'll just very quickly, very briefly, go as a little summary. So, general hotbar setup. The first bar, you want your long cooldown skills. Second bar, you want your short cooldown skills. That's the general idea. They don't have to be that way round, but it's good to group the short cooldown skills together because that's the bar you sit on and use those skills to stop you from swapping between the two the whole time. The skill points we said, you can see them here, the essential ones, essential passives and skills. Got the additional useful stuff beneath it, and this is the order which I recommend doing the useful stuff. For damage output, we want to be using the main skills are Maim, Cleave, Hurl and Whirl, and using Charge to bring them all together, and then Enrage to buff up your damage for a short time. Similar thing in PvP, there's not really much difference, other than that Spikes comes into play against Knights. and you might want to change a few things based on your elemental build or that kind of stuff. And then for defense buffs, it mainly comes down to Angelic Form, Holy Shield, and Spikes. A terrible job with my selecting there. And then in PvE you want to use Protector, PvP you want to use Lay on Hands. That's generally how it goes. You can stagger the skills to cover everything that you might want to cover. Sorry, to keep your defense constant and leave no openings for dying. And then we went through setups and stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it covered all that you might want to know about Knight skills. And well, the Knight skills were the previous videos more. This video was talking about how you actually play with the class and build do your setups and stuff. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're interested to watch the Scourings video, which I will be bringing out shortly. And otherwise concluding this series before I go on to some other stuff, which I hope you enjoy. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon.